Hello, the Pioneer viewers. As you know, we have come across reports about how important firepower is many times during the Russian-Ukrainian war. We can say that the artillery support of the Russian army is just a showmanship. We have also stated in our previous reports, Russian sources often call on the Russian world leadership for artillery support. It seems that this call for support has been answered. But how? How do you expect artillery support to be used on the front line? Of course, you would expect it to be used to destroy the enemy's supply lines, transport lines, ammunition depots, or to repel the enemy's attacks during an enemy offensive. Apart from that, it is not necessary to expect artillery support to be a gain for the Russian army at the moment. However, Russian artillery is not very good at fulfilling its main task. So, what is the Russian artillery doing? Let's analyze the developments together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to report on the Russia-Ukraine war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. You can also help us reach more people by commenting on our videos. I read all your comments. Let's start if you are ready. The Pioneer reports. Recently, a Russian source broadcasting from the front line published a very remarkable report. The title of this report allows us to have an idea about its content to a great extent. The title of the report in question is "I'm ashamed." Yes, the Russian source says he's ashamed. And why? As we mentioned at the beginning of our report, the most important needs of the Russian army on the front line is artillery support. We knew that the need for artillery was largely on the Kherson front line. However, recent reports show that the Russian army's need for artillery support is no longer on the Kherson front line. According to reports, the Russian army is about to lose its advantage on the Donetsk front line, where it has had an advantage for a long time. Therefore, the need for artillery support of the Russian army has increased considerably here. According to reports, this need of Russian army was met. However, the attacks carried out by the artillery units create question marks in mind. Now, I will share with you the reports of the Russian sources broadcasting on the front line about artillery support. The Russian source makes the following statements about the artillery support. I'm not an idiot. I understand propaganda and all that, but I have to share the fact with you. Intensity of fire does not mean accurate hits, and impressive actions do not mean impressive results. Or is it not obvious? We have already seen all this impressive density in the first month of the operation, when our artillery plowed hectares of territory, and then the advancing troops were repeatedly killed by the battalions in the unsuppressed fortifications. Then, too, our reports were supportedly advancing, accompanied by intense artillery support. But the shelling of the artillery was aimed at empty fields. Our troops attacked the enemy before they were destroyed. The old method of regulating the gray zone, where the attacking infantry found shelter in forms of funnels, could still work, but it does not work anymore. Neither bullet funnels get rid of cluster nor bullet drops. Artillery support creates only noise and explosions. There are no attacks that would affect the Ukrainians, clear their positions, or force them to retreat. The infantry is largely on its own. The combat leadership is broadcasting artillery footage, but we see that the artillery here, we can clearly see where they are attacking and when they are hitting. They are shooting empty fields. Cannons bought with the money of the Russian people are not being fired at empty fields. But in terms of artillery support for the offensive actions of armored groups and assault infantry, this results on insufficient. Even though this demand mines, with normal fire protection, you can slowly and a la scroll, that also seems unlikely. I realize the complexity of the situation when the sufficiency of artillery also lacks ammunition support. But let's say that a lot of ammunition has been accumulated for this particular operation. As far as I know, the Russian leadership has been preparing for this operation for a long time. But what are these preparations doing now? Our troops are still making no progress. Many of them are losing their lives. We still haven't achieved the set objectives. I don't think we can make progress for a long time. As you can see, the artillery units of the Russian army deployed to the region have not been able to provide the expected contribution to the Russian army. Allegedly, the Storm Z troops have attacked intensively in this region in recent days. These attacks were repelled by the defense units of the Ukrainian armed forces. It is alleged that the Storm Z troops requested assistance from the Russian artillery, but instead of providing support to the Storm Z troops, the Russian artillery shelled empty fields. The officers of the Storm Z battalion complained about this situation. We know that the attacks of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Kherson front line have severely exhausted the Russian defense forces. It was often stated that the Russian army needed artillery support on the Kherson front line. However, we did not see much information about this situation on the Donetsk front line. This means the following. At the moment, most of the successes achieved by the Russian army on the Donetsk front line are only temporary successes related to meat attacks. Because meat attacks may be able to achieve gains, but they cannot ensure the retention of those gains. It seems that the Russian army is facing this situation on the Donetsk front line. Contrary to popular belief, Russian troops are making only temporary gains on the Donetsk front line. The fact that it cannot protect these gains clearly shows that if the Ukrainian army recovers, it can turn the situation back in its favor. It is also noteworthy that the artillery support of the Russian army is not limited to the only one front line. We have already mentioned the attacks of the Storm Z troops and the lack of support from the Russian artillery. This Storm Z battalion not only lacks artillery support, at the same time, Russian soldiers serving in the Storm Z battalion are left alone. Recently, there have been some remarkable allegations about the Russian soldiers who is a member of the Storm Z units. According to the allegations, the Russian soldier was wounded after an intense meat attack. He was then transferred to the headquarters. However, the treatment of this soldier was not carried out by the Russian headquarters. The Russian soldiers had lost his leg. He had lost his ability to walk to a great extent, but the Russian soldiers was expelled from the headquarters. He was left alone in the forest. Again, according to the claims of the Russian soldiers who was left alone is not only the example. Many Russian soldiers, especially in the Storm Z units, are left alone in this way after being wounded. Russian sources react quite strongly to this situation. How can the Russian citizens, people fighting for the Russian people, be treated in this way? The question is often asked by the Russian sources. The answer is simple. The Russian leadership cares only about its own interests and is ready to sacrifice all Russian citizens for these interests. What do you think? What do you think the lack of artillery support of the Russian army will lead to on the front line? How will this situation of the Russian army affect the war? Do you think the Ukrainian army will be able to recover on the Donetsk front line? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.